Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got a Samsung 350V here. That's one of these guys that does not post. So I've already started looking at this one because when it came in, I was under the impression that it was not booting up, and I thought it was a failed hard drive, and I pulled the hard drive out and started doing all the SSD stuff, put the SSD in, and it didn't post. So word to the wise, remember, always turn on the laptop before you start working on it, because I put in a lot of time before I actually realized that the laptop was actually a no post. So yeah, that was my bad. So I've already done a few bits of looking at this to try and diagnose it, so I already know a few things that aren't going to work, but we'll start from the beginning again just for the benefit of everyone. So let's start having a look at this and see if we can get it up and running again. I'm expecting this one to be a nasty one, so here goes nothing. So first of all, I'll plug it in and turn it on, and we've got a blue power light. The DVD drive made some noise. We have a blue power light on the front and an AC indicator. However, nothing on the screen, and the screen has not initialized. Now, this is very difficult to see on newer laptops, but older laptops with matte screens like this, there is a very clear giveaway when the screen switches on. You'll see the screen turn a darker shade of black. And hopefully when we get somewhere, we'll see that happen so I can point it out. But from the fact that the screen is still just that matte grey off colour, we can determine that the screen has not powered on. That's an immediate giveaway that this is not doing anything at all. Another thing which you can sometimes do as well is you can try pressing the caps lock key to see if a caps lock light comes on. Unfortunately, we don't have a caps lock light on this, so that's not going to work for us. But if caps lock is switching on and off and you're getting an indicator LED, that shows that the laptop has actually posted, you just have no display output. So we're not sure of that. So what I'll actually do, I'm going to plug in a HDMI cable and see if anything comes out of the HDMI port. I'm expecting this to be a no, but we'll check it just in case. So I'm going to plug that in, and I'm going to reboot the laptop, because typically display outputs are only detected at power on or display driver initialization. So we need to power on, or we need to be within Windows with drivers running that can detect a change. So we're turning on again, and there's nothing coming out of the HDMI port. Very well. Cool, okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start swapping out some memory and see if anything changes. So let's drop out these memory modules, and I'm going to grab a known good module. Now, all of my test modules are DDR3L, which is low power DDR3. Now, low power DDR3 is backwards compatible, so we can put it in non-low power slots. However, some laptops just don't like low power memory. So I'm gonna find a non-DDR. I'm gonna find a non-L module just to be certain. Here we go. Here's a really basic bitch 2 GB module. Let's shove that in there. No idea which slot is number 1. It shouldn't matter on a laptop, but we'll try it in both just to be certain. So that's in. Power in. And power on. We've got power light. And again, I'm watching the display to see if it changes color. You guys may not see it on the camera, but if it happens, I'll point it out. And same thing there. It's not power cycling. We're not seeing the power LED go out, turn off, then back on again, or anything like that. There's no signs that it's RAM training or doing anything at all. It's just is. So we're gonna quickly move on to the next thing, which is move that memory module to the other slot. Fine. If we start seeing any changes in behavior, power cycle, a flash, a beep, anything at all, then we slow down and give it more time. However, if you're not getting display initialization or anything at all, then yeah. Power on, blue light. The CPU fan is cutting in and out. which suggests to me that the EC is running. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yeah, that's still nothing at all. Okay, fine. So the next thing I want to do is I want to reset the BIOS. Now, we're coming up to the point of how far I had gotten before I started recording. So the BIOS battery, the RTC battery, is not accessible on this laptop. It's not under this panel here. That's just the Wi-Fi card. What we do have is there is RTC Reset here. There is a jumper here. Let's zoom in on that. So down here, we've got these two little pads here, JCMOS. It says RTC Reset. So this is essentially a reset switch. If we short those two together, that should reset the BIOS. Now, spoilers, I have actually already tried this with a pair of tweezers and it didn't make any difference. But those jumpers are really hard to get onto. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a little solder blob across that just to make sure that I've exhausted the possibility of this working. After that, we're going to have to take the laptop apart. So I would not normally consider this to be a normal step for working on a laptop, but I want to try this just for science. So as I say, I've tried this off camera and it didn't work. So I'm going to solder blob that and see what happens. Because if it works, then we learn that you can't rely on just a pair of tweezers here. There we go. So I've put a massive solder blob on that, so there's no question that jumper is now short. So we'll leave that for a sec, and we'll leave that for as long as it takes me to find my solder wick. And now let's remove the solder blob. There we go, those are no longer shorted. So one more time for the people in the back, I would not consider this to be standard procedure for resetting a BIOS. However, as I say, I just want to see, because if it works this time, that means that that is actually what is necessary for that jumper to work. Another thing, I suppose, you could get a little, if you got a conductive pad, like an old button, a rubber button membrane or something like that, you could use that as your little reset pusher to make sure that you've shorted those terminals properly. Problem is they're so small and close together that it's remarkably difficult just to get a screwdriver to reliably short across that. On the other hand, this will probably not work anyway. It didn't work. However, at this point, if I remove the RTC battery and that does fix it, no one can say that I didn't short the jumper properly. So that is why I wanted to solder the jumper, just so if the BIOS battery proves to be the solution to this, no one can say that I did not short that jumper correctly. All right, let's get the covers off. Honestly, I'm not sure if the dark grey panel of the keyboard is supposed to be coming off or the entire top. I'm going to go for the keyboard. Oh, there we go. I've got something. Oh my word. It's a three-piece. I hate it. There we go, that's the keyboard off. Now we can take these screws out, which gets the top cover off. And blimey, there's still a lot of screws to go. There we go. Ooh. Hello, liquid damage that I wasn't told about. So much hate. RTC battery is soldered. Alright. Has this liquid damage actually hit anything important? I'm not sure that it has. It might be on... might be in the SATA ports for the DVD drive, but... it's all on the plastic here, but I don't actually think it's hit any of the motherboard. We can desolder the BIOS battery from here, but I'm going to actually get the motherboard out for a visual inspection because we have found liquid damage. So, just to make sure I don't miss anything, let's keep going. It is very tempting to work with just what you can see, but in my experience, take the board out, because I have been trolled by that before, and I've seen other people be trolled by that before, where they've not bothered to take the board out, and the answers have been right there on the other side. Okay, we're just being held up by the cooling system now. I think I can work out around that. Fan out. Ah. There we go, and... oh, boo. I don't think this DC jack unplugs. I think it's soldered, which means that's got to come out as well. There we go. Right. Chuck all of that nonsense to one side. A whooper! Yeah, there was nothing to see. I mean, there's a lot of schmutz in there. I probably could have gotten that out with the air compressor. However, bottom of the motherboard is actually clean as a whistle. Considering how dirty the top is, that's remarkably clean, actually. Very well. Okay, then. Right. Let's clean this board up. So firstly, we're going to disconnect the RTC battery. So I'm not expecting this to work because we've already tried the reset, but we're going to do it anyway because I don't trust reset jumpers. I'm probably about to be proven wrong. I'm going to disconnect this battery. It's not going to make a difference, and all of the reset jumper purists will be like, ha, told you. However, if this does work, I can say, ha, I told you. So, place your bets, everyone. So, if you do encounter a soldered-on battery like this, don't panic. Just get your soldering iron, warm that bad boy up, and just desolder. You don't need to be an expert solderer to deal with this. Just one at a time. One leg, then the other leg. Probably only need one leg off, to be honest, but I'm going to get both of them just for good measure. And, while they're not mandatory, you'll notice I've got these ceramic tweezers here. Very handy when you're doing stuff like this, because obviously I don't need to worry about shorting out the battery. I mean, it's not like it particularly matters if you short this cell out. It won't pull enough current to really go nuclear. However, obviously it's nice not to. The only problem with these ceramic tweezers is, as you can see, they don't actually close very well. So these tweezers are not particularly good for component level stuff, because when you start trying to pick up small stuff, they're just not, they don't have the accuracy for it. However, very useful to have in your inventory. Ceramic tweezers, look for them on eBay. Right, am I going to do anything else with this board yet? I don't think I will. I could start cleaning this board while I leave the battery off, but we're going to go one step at a time. So I'm going to leave that for a minute, then we'll put the battery back on, we'll try it again. Then if that doesn't work, we'll clean the board, and then we'll try again. So let's go with that. While I'm here, where is our BIOS? So I did see, I had a comment on one of the previous videos with BIOS programs saying how to find BIOS chip. because normally I tend to sort of scan across the board and go, there it is. So what am I looking for? Well, the problem is there are a couple of different packages that I'm looking for, and there are different locations where I'm looking. I'm looking for certain package shapes, and I'm looking for certain locations. So, firstly, locations. I'm looking for something that is near the CPU, near the PCH, or near the Super I/O chip, or the embedded controller, the EC. In this case, this one is an ENE branded one, so it's sometimes known as the ENE chip. However, this is the EC embedded controller. This handles the fan, the LEDs, just basic hardware turn-ons, hardware I/O, that kind of thing, which is why it's also known as the Super I/O chip. So you would commonly find a BIOS chip around here somewhere. However, it's probably on the other side of the board. The other thing I'm looking for is package shapes. So I'd be looking for something that looks like one of these. So this is a SOP8, SOP8 package. So it looks like a chip with 8 legs on it. Very distinct shape. However, this particular one, this is a MOSFET. And I can tell that because A, it's on a power rail. And this is a big power rail because as you can see, it's got massive fat traces all around it. And B, it's also labeled PQ. And Q is going to be a transistor. The chips we're looking for will be labeled with a U, like that one there, U14. And likewise, the Super I/O itself will be UB1, for example. And then here we've got UH1, and so on. So I'm not seeing anything on the top of this board that looks like a BIOS chip. If we turn it over, there we go. These ones are super easy to spot, actually. So if we turn it over, in terms of positioning, we're nowhere near the chips I'm expecting to find it in. But straight away, we've got 2 SOP8 chips here, UH4 and UH3. And I know immediately that these are our BIOS chips because the final giveaway is just to look at what's written on the chip. So we've got a WinBond chip, and that's 25Q. So that's a 25 series SPI ROM chip. And we've got an MXIC MX25L. So again, these are both 25 series SPI ROM chips. So that immediately tells me that these are our BIOS chips. Why are there 2, you ask? One of them will be the main BIOS for the system. The other one will be for, oh God, here we go. This is controversial. It could be EC firmware. It could be the management engine. It could be it could be a recovery BIOS. There are several things that could be on the secondary BIOS chip. And there are probably patterns. I've got some viewers who are experts on this, and they probably will be able to say on this age of laptop, this would be X. However, the point is, it's a secondary BIOS chip that has other firmware on it. So we'll come back to those in a minute if we get that far. The reason why I'm pointing these out is I suspect we're going to go for a BIOS reset on this. So, right, we've had this hecking battery off for long enough, and I've waffled for long enough. Let's put the BIOS battery back on. Or the cell, rather. Which way up did it go? It went that way up. Right, warm up the soldering iron again. There we go. They're kind of rough solder joints, but it's a button cell. Who cares? Okay. Right, what do we need to turn this on? I shall put it back in the case because then we have the display. Right, that should be enough for a power on cycle. Now we need this top bit as well because it's got the power button on it. So we'll just plug that back in. Right, we might need the front panel as well. So let's plug in, because the trackpad also has the front panel LEDs on it, and sometimes you do need those. So let's just run that again. Power. Right, we've got an AC light on the front. Let's try that again. Oh, there we go. Right, I'm going to get a drink and leave it like that. I'm 99% certain it's not going to start, but I'm going to leave it like that just in case something happens if I give it a couple of minutes. So I'm going to grab a drink. Then after that, we're going to take it apart again, clean it up properly, reassemble it, try it one more time. I don't think that's going to work either, but I'm going to try it anyway. And then after that, I think we're moving to a BIOS flash on this one. Because if it ain't the BIOS, then I'm kind of out of ideas. Yeah, I'll see you guys in a moment. Right, I'm just going to give this a basic brush down. If you are in an area susceptible to static electricity, you should probably be a bit more careful with this. Take anti-static precautions, etc. I am not in an area susceptible to static. I am susceptible to dust, however. Yeah, that's just surface dust, really. There's not really a lot to see there. All's good. Okay. Am I going to inspect the CPU? I don't think I will. However, I am going to quickly try starting it without the screen connected, just in case we've got like a shorted screen or something. I can't imagine that would stop post, but I don't know. Okay, HDMI in. I don't normally bother doing this test because I've never actually achieved anything with it, but I'm going to do it just for posterity. Also because it's kind of late, and honestly I don't want to start doing the BIOS stuff right now. I'm going home in 10 minutes, so I'm just going to try this anyway. We don't have a CPU fan connected, so we need to be quick with this test. So I'm literally just going to let it go and just be like, you got 10 seconds, and then we turn it off. Like, it's not going to overheat instantly. However, yeah, don't run without cooling. It's not a good idea. No, nothing out of the HDMI port. So, no, it's definitely not posting. All right. Okay, BIOS it is then. So I'm going to need to track down... I'm going to see if I... So I'm going to need to see if I can find a replacement BIOS for this. This is going to be tricky because Samsung do not provide real BIOS downloads. You're supposed to download BIOS updates through some stupid app that is stupid and dumb and doesn't work, and I hate it. But if we go hunting around, we might be able to find a clean BIOS image on like Badcaps or somewhere like that. So let's take a look at what chips we've got here. We've got the WinBond, which is a 25Q32BV, and the MXIC, which is a 25L16. So I reckon the WinBond is the main, because that's probably going to be a 32 megabit chip. So I'm just going to look those up and find out. Yeah, and that is correct. It's a 32 megabit chip, which 32 divided by 8 gives us 4 megabytes. And a 4 megabyte BIOS chip is about correct for a laptop like this. The other one is a 2 megabyte chip, and as I say, that's going to be EC firmware, ME something. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not what we're looking for. The main one is what we want. So let's take this guy off the board and let's get a dump of its contents. So I'm going to stick some flux around this just to help transfer the heat a bit better. I don't know if this actually makes a difference or not. You want to put flux on when you're soldering stuff on, but when you're removing stuff, I'm not sure if it actually matters if you use flux or not. It certainly feels better. Be interested to hear more experienced people say whether they care about adding flux for removal or not. Ah. Come back. I should reflow these joints. It's old solder on this thing. You tend to just keep recycling the same solder on your adapter boards, and it gets tired. Read chip. Speedy boy. Bam. Auto verifying. Uh, 350V. Alright. One dump. Good. Right, I need to go and find a replacement BIOS for this. I'm going to go and do some poking around and I'll get back to you. Right, I've managed to get a BIOS download for this. As I mentioned, Samsung don't provide these. You need to get it through some weird app, and I've never seen that app work, so I didn't even bother trying. Sod's Law says there's actually a way of getting around that, but if you do know it, let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, it never works. In any case, I Google searched QCLA4 LA-8862P Rev2 BIOS, and I managed to find download links through those Google search results. So I've got a BIOS that I have downloaded. I don't know what region this is for, so I'm not sure if this is going to work. However, because we have a dump of the original BIOS, we're free to just try flashing some different things to it and seeing if it works or not. If it doesn't work, we'll just flash the dump back to it and we're back where we started again. So the other thing we need to keep in mind as well is if this does work, because we flashed a random BIOS to this, it's probably going to have the wrong serial number and stuff like that. So that's something that we will address, but we'll have a look at that if this actually works. I'm not going to bother trying to transfer serial numbers and stuff like that when I don't even know if this is going to fix the laptop. So even though it's going to require some extra soldering back and forth, we'll actually just see if we can get the thing to run first and then worry about the rest of it. So let's open it up. The two files I've got, we've got 3 files in this particular dump. There is a main one, which is a 4 megabyte file, and that's the one that we want. There's a 2 megabyte one for that other chip. And then also there's a KBC one here. So presumably there's another ROM somewhere on this motherboard that is for the keyboard controller or something like that. And I think that's because you can change the firmware on the keyboard controller corresponds to the mapping for the keyboard. So this is, I believe this is for different regional things. So if you're doing a weird regional layout, this is where that information is stored. However, don't quote me on that, not 100% certain, that's just what would make sense. So in any case, let's go ahead and zap this back onto the chip. So let's see, that has loaded correctly, so all seems well there. We've got our dump, so we're free to do this, and we're going to go ahead and click write. Writing is complete, so I'm just going to touch up the pads on the laptop over here, just so they take a resolder nicely. The original solder on the motherboard will be unleaded solder, which is fine, that does work. However, I'm going to flow some nice leaded solder on there just so I get nice, easy reflow. And just a reminder, when you're working on these, take extra special care not to knock any of the little resistors around the BIOS chip loose. It's very easy to do it without realizing it. Ask me how I know. And pin 1 is in the bottom left. Oh, we're going sideways. This is the part where you start knocking things loose. There we go, that's alright. I'd like to touch up those joints, but we'll actually just touch up those joints. I don't know why I'm hesitating. Right, now we've just got to power it up and see if anything has changed. So let's put some memory in it. Right. How do we feel? Do we feel lucky? We have a charge light on the front, a very dim one, but a charge light nonetheless. Let's power on. Power. Ugh, still nothing. Give it a bit of time just in case it needs to sort itself out. I'm about out of ideas. I'm going to flash the other chip as well, and I'm going to check the CPU, because we haven't inspected the CPU yet. I'm just not expecting to see anything of interest. Let's have a quick look, just in case we see any telltale signs that the CPU is kill. If we see that the thermal paste is completely shot to hell, there is some warmth here, then perhaps that might indicate that the CPU cooked and died and overheated. Oh no, that thermal paste is fine. Surely that has been repasted at some point in its lifetime. Okay, Hail Mary, we'll do the other chip as well. If I don't get anything after flashing this other chip, then I am giving up. Alright. This is the last attempt. I think we're done, if I'm honest. But we'll try it one last time. Oh! Genuinely didn't think that was going to work. I hadn't bothered focusing the camera or anything. I was turning it on. I was like, yeah, I'm literally, I was about to reach for stop recording and just be like, we're done here, kind of thing. Well then. I don't know what to say. I didn't think it was going to work. Okay, right, we're in business. So, okay, right, we have things to do now. We have things to do. We have a working system again. So we flashed a random BIOS onto the two BIOS chips and we had a success. So firstly, we need to have a look at the problems with doing that and where it works and where it doesn't work. So firstly, it works because the laptop now starts and runs when we have both the chips flashed. So that is a win. And in previous videos, that's where I've then said, cool, reassemble, we are done. However, people in the comments have pointed out quite fairly that what I've done there is, yes, it works, but I have not transferred across certain information unique to the laptop, like the serial number, Ethernet MAC addresses, Windows product keys, stuff like that. So I've done a bit of research on this and I've conversed with some of the folks in my Discord who are very knowledgeable on this. So massive shout out to A Wild Floor Lamp, you know who you are, from the Discord. Who gave me a lot of help with this today. I was aware that this existed. This is the first time I've actually tried to do it. So there are a few things that we need to consider. Number one, the random BIOS that I downloaded from the internet, when someone takes a BIOS rip from a laptop, you can't necessarily just flash that to another laptop, even if it's the same model, because the laptop has Intel Management Engine in it, and the ME has configured data that is unique to that specific device. Now, when you have a clean BIOS, the ME region of the BIOS is in what's called an initialized state. And that means that it is ready to self-configure. And the first time the laptop starts up, it will self-configure and build up its data store. So if someone makes a rip of the BIOS from their laptop and uploads it to the internet, we have to hope that they have cleaned the ME region to restore it to an initialized state before distributing it. And we can reasonably presume that that was the case with the one that I got here. However, if you download a random file from someone else on the internet, it might not have been cleaned first. So consider that if you flash the BIOS and then find that it doesn't work. Now, I'm not going to go into ME cleaning in this because that is a whole nother can of worms. I do want to make a video about ME cleaning, but this is not the time for it. So we're going to skip past that for now because I don't need to do it. So the next thing is, why are there two BIOS chips and what is on each one? Well, the actual BIOS is read as a complete image. It is a 6 megabyte image, and that has been divided onto a 4 megabyte chip and a 2 megabyte chip. Why have they done this? It's unclear, in all honesty. There are some laptops where some of the information, such as EC firmware, will be on one of those chips as well. However, it's incorrect to say that the second chip is for the EC firmware. Because A, it might not be there, and B, you will also have other parts of the BIOS that's also on that chip. So it's not just the EC chip, even if the EC does have external firmware. Some ECs are programmed directly onto the chip as well, onto the EC chip itself. So again, this is a whole can of worms, and this is why there's so much conflicting information out there as to why there are two chips, because it varies. However, in the instance of this laptop, in all probability, they needed 6 megabytes of storage, well, for their implementation, and in order to save costs, it was presumably cheaper just to stick a 4 meg and a 2 meg chip on there than to get, for example, an 8 megabyte chip. So we have two chips, and we have data that is spanned across those chips that we need to transfer across. So we have got a backup of each one. What we're going to do now is we're going to analyze this BIOS image and find the data that we want to transfer. So I'm looking for serial number, Windows product key, and the Ethernet MAC address. So now to start looking at this BIOS image, I'm going to use UEFI tool. I've got UEFI tool version 0.59 here, and we're going to open this, and we're going to attempt to look at one of the BIOS files. So let's go File, Open, and I'm going to try and open the WinBond chip. So let's just hit Open there. And this kicks out this error message, image is truncated. So the reason for this is because we don't have a complete image here, we just have part of it. So in order to actually start working on this, we have to combine the dumps from both chips into a single file, so we then have a complete 6 megabyte image to start analyzing. So this is actually very easy to do. So at this point now, I'm going to start renaming some of my files into something that's a bit easier to manage. So firstly, make sure you have a backup of your original dump files in case you make a complete hash up of all of this. Make a copy of this, put it somewhere else, not in the same folder, just so you don't get lost. So I'm going to rename this to old-winbond. And I'm going to change this one to old-mxic. And then I'm going to go into my random download, and we're just going to copy these two out. And I'm going to change these to new-mxic and new-winbond. And I know which one is which because the WinBond chip is the 4 megabyte file and the MXIC is a 2 megabyte file. So we've got our old file and our new one. So firstly, we want to combine these into a single 6 megabyte file that we can start working on. And we also want to combine these into a 6 megabyte file that we can work on. So I will open a command line. So from command, I'm going to navigate to that folder. So I'll just do CD and I'll just paste in the full path there. And what I'm going to do is we're going to use just simply the copy command. So if we do copy and we do /B, the B means binary. So we're telling copy that we're working with binary files. and we're going to copy old-winbond.bin plus old-mxic.bin to old-image.bin. Now, image is an arbitrary name that I've just made up. I'm just going to call it image. So what we've got here now is we're working in binary, and we're saying take the total sum of WinBond and MXIC and output it as a single file. And we can do this because we're in binary mode. Because when you're dealing with binary data, it's just a series of binary data. So when we add two files together, you take two files and you just put them together. And that's literally what we're doing here. So enter. So you'll notice it says one file copied. And if we go back to our folder here, we now have old image, and that is a 6 megabyte file. So we're going to do the same thing with our new image now, because we're going to need that as well. So let's quickly do that. So let's do copy/b new winbond.bin plus new mxic.bin to new-image.bin. And now we have the same thing for our replacement BIOS. So now let's go back into UEFI tool, and I'm going to open oldimage.bin. And now we're actually able to open this and start seeing the data stored within. So this is the contents of this BIOS file. Now there's a lot of information here, and a lot of it is way above my head. However, there are some important things we can look for. So the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, well, where is the stuff we're looking for? Where is the serial number? Where is the product key? Where is the MAC address? And the problem is that this varies depending on the implementation of the BIOS file. So for this purpose, I need to point out that this is not a walkthrough on how to do this. This is more of a proof of concept, because unless you're doing this on exactly the same laptop as me, it's going to look different on your screen. So there are guidelines and things that we can look for to figure out where this information is. However, I'm still too green to this to point that out. But as an example, let's start out with looking for a serial number and a Windows product key. Now, a common thing for that is, firstly, we've got our ME region there. We're not going to touch this. We're going to leave that well alone. However, the BIOS region, this is where the stuff we're looking for will be. And serial numbers and product keys are typically saved somewhere in the padding. Now, padding is just empty space between sections of code, because the BIOS will be arranged and aligned in a certain way. So if we have a look at the padding we've got here, this one is empty. This one is empty. And again, I can right click on this and do hex view. And as you can see, it's filled with Fs, which is just empty, nothing there. However, this one down here is non-empty. So if we open this up and have a look, we've got a load of Fs. But if we scroll down, here we go. Here's a chunk of data. Now that looks an awful lot like a Windows product key to me. So here's our product key. Now we would expect to find the serial number in the same place as this, or either in one of the other paddings or just in this padding with the Windows product key. However, for some reason it's not there on this one. Not sure why. Again, this is not an exact science. However, we're starting to make progress here. So firstly, I'm going to extract this section. So we'll close that hex view. I'm going to right click and extract as is. And we're just going to save this, and I'll just save that as whatever the default name is. It doesn't matter. So let's just save that as padding non-empty padding.pad, save. So we've put that into our folder of our BIOS shenanigans here. So the next bit of information we need is we need to find other stuff. So our MAC address and such like, there are two common things we could be looking for here. If this laptop had Intel Gigabit Ethernet, we would probably find that there would be a GBE region somewhere in the BIOS that would have all of the firmware for the Ethernet controller in it. However, this laptop has a Realtek Ethernet controller, so we're not going to find a GBE region. So in all probability, the MAC address, along with probably the serial number as well, is going to be buried somewhere in the rest of the configuration data for this BIOS. So we can look at that in these two sections here. So these big sections here with the NVRAM, this is known as a file system. And the NVRAM, this is basically where we have all of our configuration data for the BIOS. So what we're going to do, because we don't know exactly where the data we're looking for is, we can just copy the entire file systems. There is a catch with that though, is we know that this BIOS image is corrupted and doesn't boot, but we don't know where it's broken. So what we'll do is we'll just grab both of these we'll grab both of these file systems and copy them into the new one and hope for the best. If we do this and it doesn't work, we need to start getting a bit more analytical. We'd have to start digging deeper and find out exactly where that data is so we can get individual bits of data out of it. Or we could then try doing that and then cleaning the ME region again. Or we might find that if we cleaned the ME on this broken BIOS, it would start working as well. However, the simplest thing to do right now is just to copy these two file systems that contain NVRAM data. So I'll right-click on both of these and extract as is. And this time we're extracting these file systems here. So we'll extract this one, save, and then we'll do this one as well, extract as is. And we're just going to make sure that we don't overwrite, so we'll just put a -2 on the end of that. And now we have extracted the information that we want to recover from this BIOS. Now, one of the catches of UEFI tool version 059 is that it doesn't allow us to modify this image. We can only extract data from it. However, an older version of UEFI tool, specifically version 028, does allow you to import data. So what we're going to do now is open version 028 so we can start saving data into our rebuilt image. So in UEFI tool 028, we're going to open the new image because this is the one that we want to modify. This is a working BIOS image that we want to import our information into. So let's open that. So immediately you'll notice that in this version of UEFI tool, we get a lot less information here. Much of this data is less decoded, and this is why we're not doing our exporting in the old version, because we can't see what we're doing here. There's a lot less information. We could probably figure it out, but we're working with a lot less vision here. But we can work with this. So firstly, here's our non-empty padding again. And if I right click, you'll notice we don't have the hex view here. So again, you can see why we're not just universally working in version 028 anyway. But we do have this replaced as is option. So let's replace the padding with the padding that we exported from the old image file. Done. So as you can see, we're going to remove some padding and then replace it with some new padding. So now we want to do the same thing with those first two file systems here. So let's replace these. So replace as is. And we want to do the first one. And then we're going to do that again here. Replace as is with the second one. Like so. So now, as you can see, we are removing and replacing a padding and two of the file systems. And so on the assumption that there is no corrupted data in the data that we're importing, we should end up with a rebuilt BIOS image that has the user data from this specific laptop in it. So what we'll do now is we'll then just save that image file, and I'm going to export this as rebuilt.bin. And do I want to open the constructed file? No, not particularly. All right, we're nearly there. So now we have a rebuilt.bin, which is our newly rebuilt BIOS image. But the problem is it's a 6 megabyte image, and we have two chips of 4 megabytes and 2 megabytes that we need to put this onto. So now we have to split this again. And there's not really an elegant way to do this, so we're just going to do it manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this with a hex editor. And in this case, I use HXD. And so now, as you can see, we've got the raw hex code for our binary file. So what I need to do now is figure out where I'm going to split this. Now, if I was a smarter man, I would know the exact offset for a per megabyte basis, but I don't. But we can easily look this up. If I open one of the 4 megabyte files, so let's just take old winbond.bin, and if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see the final address is 003FFFF0. So that is our cutoff point. So on rebuilt.bin, I've got the cursor at the top at 0, and if we scroll down to 03FFFF0, and let's do shift click. So now this selection is the first 4 megabytes of the file. So what I'll do, let's select after that. So let's start from here, scroll all the way to the bottom, and select. And I'll just hit the delete key. So this operation will change the file size. Yes, I want to continue. And now we've got the file ending at FFFF0. So now we've got the first 4 megabytes of it. So we can just export this now. So we'll save as, and we're now going to call this rebuilt winbond.bin. And now I want to open the big file again. And now we want to cut off the top 4 megabytes, so we're left with the last 2 megabytes. And then that will be our MXIC chip. So we'll scroll down again. 03FFFF0 and delete. Bam. Now, of course, you'll notice that our addresses have reset. So we've deleted the top half and the bottom has now all pushed up to the top. However, now our final address, as you can see, is 001FFFF0. So let's save that. Save as. Rebuilt MXIC. And now we've got 2 files, and as you can see, our WinBond file is 4 megabytes, and our MXIC file is 2 megabytes, which means these are now the correct size for flashing onto the chip. So now we've taken it and we've literally just guillotined it down at the 4 megabyte marker to split it across the 2 chips again. And the BIOS and the laptop will just know where the data is, because that is part of the programming for this BIOS, is it will know which data is on which chip, because that will be in the BIOS programming. So now I'm going to flash these onto the chips and then we can put them back on the board. Okay, we've got 2 rebuilt BIOS chips. Let's see if this works. And I'm going to touch up these solder joints again just because we've done quite a lot of soldering on here now. And here we go. Power. Yes! So our BIOS version is the same as the updated one. I'm not sure what the original BIOS version is. However, now we've got a working laptop and we know that we've copied in the previous user data that was from the old BIOS revision. So now we have a nice clean fix and we know that it's going to contain all the necessary information. So again, the laptop was already working. However, for good practice, we want to be able to import this information. So that's it. I'm going to actually reassemble this laptop properly and we're done. Now, normally we could just enter the BIOS screen to find and check the serial number of the laptop there to verify if this was actually successful or not. But this laptop doesn't seem to display its serial number in the BIOS. So what we'll do instead is we'll check the Windows product key. So I've got a PowerShell window open here and I've just typed in WMIC path software licensing service get OA yada yada yada. It's on the screen. Read it. And as you can see, it has now displayed the product key that is stored in the BIOS, and that matches the product key that we pulled out of the original BIOS file. So now we have confirmed that we have the updated BIOS with our original product key in it. So from this, it's reasonable to assume that the serial number and any MAC address stuff is also correct. However, that is harder to validate because it's more difficult to find that information because it's a bit obfuscated in the original BIOS. In any case, though, we now have a fixed laptop. So, thank you everyone for tuning in. This one was a bit of a... Yay, I get to remove Norton. Hooray! In any case, we now have a fixed laptop. So, this was just another corrupted BIOS. Which is similar to what I've fixed on many other systems now, but we've now gone a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole into showing how we can not just do a nuke and reset on the BIOS, but actually import some of the previous system information that is unique to the device as well. So I'm going to be trying to do more of this in the future to start parting the clouds a bit more, because it's very complicated and it's very difficult to provide consistent information due to how much it varies between devices. That's the difficulty. This is why there's so much conflicting information, is that it's different on different devices. But I'm going to keep researching, I'm going to keep practicing, and I'll keep bringing you updates on what I've learned along the way. So thank you very much for watching. As always, my support links are down in the description below, including the Discord where helpful people reside. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.